How could a comet, a simple visitor of ice and dust, fool all of our best astronomers? How could an object tracked by the world's most sophisticated observatories, from the high desert of Chile to the silent void of space, harbor a secret so profound it threatened to rewrite not just the history of the stars, but the history of our own world? On July 1st, 2025, in the hushed, data-filled control rooms of the Atlas survey, a new designation entered the astronomical lexicon: 3I Atlas. It was only the third interstellar object ever detected, a messenger from a distant, unknown sun, and the scientific community erupted with excitement. Yet, as the combined power of our global astronomical arsenal focused on this traveler, a detail emerged that was not merely unusual but utterly impossible. The visitor from the stars was not what it seemed, and the truth it carried was far stranger and closer to home than anyone could have ever imagined. The first clue to the deception lay in the gossamer cloud of gas and dust surrounding the object's nucleus, its coma. Spectrographic analysis, the science of decoding light to reveal chemical composition, returned a baffling result. The ratio of carbon dioxide to water was an astonishing 8:1, a strange but not unheard of anomaly. The true paradox, the detail that sent waves of disbelief through astrophysics departments worldwide, was hidden deeper, in the very atomic heart of that CO2. The specific isotopic signature, the precise ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 and oxygen-18 to oxygen-16, was a ghost. It matched no known interstellar medium, no extrasolar model, no theoretical composition of a body formed in another star system. Instead, it was a perfect, undeniable match for the atmospheric signature of our own planet, Earth. But an Earth of the deep geological past, specifically from the late Paleozoic era, some 250 million years ago. A visitor from another star should not, could not be wearing the precise atmospheric fingerprint of our own ancient world. The initial reaction within the scientific establishment was, justifiably, one of rigorous skepticism. An error in the data was the most logical conclusion. A calibration flaw in the spectrograph, atmospheric interference, a software glitch. Any number of mundane explanations were proposed and exhaustively investigated, but the anomaly refused to vanish. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope confirmed the readings. The Hubble Space Telescope, turning its legendary eye towards the object, returned the same impossible signature. Finally, the James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful instrument ever built by humanity, delivered the final chilling verdict. The data was correct. 3I Atlas was outgassing the ghost of an ancient Earth. The mystery deepened from a simple curiosity into a foundational paradox. It was a celestial object obeying the laws of orbital mechanics, but violating the laws of cosmic origin. The protagonist of our story, the mystery itself, had been born, and it was now resisting every attempt to explain it away with conventional thinking. This is the point where our investigation truly begins. When confronted with an impossible fact, we must question our assumptions. We must dare to ask the forbidden question. What if we are looking at this problem from the wrong perspective? What if the origin of 3I Atlas is not the central mystery? What if its composition is the key? So we pose the great thesis of our journey tonight. What if this object is not a visitor from another star, but a messenger from another time, a time before us? We propose that this is not a comet at all, but an artifact, a probe, a time capsule, or perhaps the debris of a catastrophe, launched by a highly advanced, globe-spanning technological civilization that existed on Earth millions of years ago. This impossible clue from the sky forces us to turn our gaze downward, to treat our own planet as a vast, cold case, a crime scene that has been dormant for eons, waiting for the right key to unlock its secrets. To even begin to contemplate such a possibility, we must first recalibrate our minds to a scale of time so immense it defies human intuition: deep time. If you were to hold a rope that represents the 4.5 billion year history of the Earth, stretching from Los Angeles to New York City, the entirety of recorded human history, from the first cuneiform tablets to the modern day, would occupy the width of your hand. the Industrial Revolution would be thinner than a single strand of hair. We exist in a fleeting moment, a flash of lightning in an endless night. The geological epochs that preceded us, the Permian, the Triassic, the Jurassic, are not just names in a textbook. They are gulfs of time so profound that entire worlds, with their own unique ecosystems and evolutionary dramas, could have risen and fallen within them, leaving behind almost no trace that our fleeting civilization could easily recognize. It is in this abyss of forgotten eons that our search must begin. The most immediate and logical objection to this hypothesis is, of course, the lack of evidence. If a civilization capable of launching artifacts into solar orbit once dominated this planet, where are its cities? Where are its monuments? Where are the ruins? The answer is as simple as it is profound. The Earth itself has erased them. Our planet is not a static museum. It is a dynamic, violent, and relentless machine of renewal. Tectonic plates subduct, pulling continents into the mantle to be melted and reborn as volcanic rock. Erosion grinds mountains into sand. Glaciers scour landscapes down to the bedrock. In just 50,000 years, a geological blink of an eye, nearly every trace of our own civilization, our steel skyscrapers, our concrete highways, our sprawling cities, would be compressed, corroded, and pulverized into a barely distinguishable sedimentary layer. After millions of years, the chances of finding a preserved ruin would be statistically close to zero. The evidence, therefore, must be of a different nature. If we cannot search for cities of stone and steel, we must instead hunt for the more subtle and enduring fingerprints of a technological society. We must search for techno-signatures. These are the indirect, often microscopic or chemical markers of industrial-scale activity that can be preserved within the geological record. Our own civilization is creating them right now, laying down a future fossil layer that will be unique in Earth's history. This Anthropocene layer is rich with things that nature does not produce: microscopic plastic particles, synthetic chemical compounds from pesticides, globally distributed layers of soot from fossil fuels, and most enduringly, the unique radioactive isotopes from nuclear weapons testing and power generation. These are the kinds of clues: anomalous chemical spikes, unnatural isotopic ratios, and complex molecular structures that could survive the ravages of deep time, long after our proudest monuments have returned to dust. This line of inquiry is not mere speculation. It is a formal scientific thought experiment known as the Silurian hypothesis. Coined by NASA climate scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank, the hypothesis poses a direct question. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years ago, what traces would it have left behind, and would we be able to detect them today? It is a serious attempt to consider what the geological footprint of a pre-human industrial age might look like. By grounding our investigation in this framework, we move from the realm of fiction into the discipline of forensic geology. The Silurian hypothesis gives us a search image. It tells us that we should not be looking for buried spaceships, but for anomalous layers of sediment, for strange isotopic imbalances, and for chemical markers that betray the work of intelligence, not nature. With this new framework in mind, we can now see the interstellar object 3I Atlas for what it truly might be. It is no longer just a paradoxical comet, it becomes our Rosetta Stone. Its impossible ancient Earth chemical signature is the anomaly that forces us to re-examine the evidence buried in our own world. It is the key that connects the sky to the ground. It provides us with a specific chemical fingerprint and, crucially, a specific time frame. The signature points directly to the late Paleozoic era, around the time of the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the single greatest cataclysm in the history of complex life, known as the Great Dying. The comet is telling us precisely where to look and what to look for. It is a message in a bottle thrown into the vast ocean of time that has finally returned to our shore, carrying a map to a world we never knew existed. Therefore, our investigation will proceed methodically. Following this map through 3 distinct layers of evidence, our journey begins where all of the planet's history is written, in stone. We will delve into the geological record itself, examining the great chapters of Earth's autobiography. We will look for planetary-scale scars, evidence of activity so vast it could alter the face of the globe. Our first exhibit will be the Great Unconformity, a mysterious gap in the geological layers spanning, in some places, over 1 billion years of missing time. Mainstream science explains this as a simple period of erosion, but viewed through our new lens, might this missing chapter hide a more profound and deliberate secret? We will treat the planet itself as a witness, its rock layers as a testimony that has waited eons to be heard correctly. From the macro, we will zoom into the micro. The second stage of our investigation will move from geology to forensic chemistry. If a global industrial civilization existed, its activities would have left behind an indelible chemical residue, a faint stain on the fabric of time. We will metaphorically drill deep into Antarctic ice cores and dredge sediments from the abyssal plains of the ocean floor, searching for the technosignatures predicted by the Silurian hypothesis. We are hunting for the chemical ghosts of industry, anomalous spikes in rare earth metals, isotopes like xenon-129 that point to nuclear fission, and perhaps even complex, non-biological microfilaments, the remnants of advanced materials or nanotechnology. These are the fingerprints on the geological murder weapon, clues that could prove that the Great Dying was not entirely an act of nature. Our final line of inquiry will be the most provocative, shifting from the hard evidence of rock and chemistry to the faint, persistent echoes in human memory. If a world-spanning civilization possessed of godlike technology suffered a cataclysmic collapse, would all knowledge of it truly vanish without a trace? Or might the story survive, passed down through countless generations of traumatized survivors, becoming distorted and mythologized over time? We will re-examine the most ancient and universal myths of humanity, the stories of a golden age, a lost paradise like Atlantis, a great flood that cleansed the world, and a fall from grace brought about by hubris. We will ask if these are merely moral fables, or if they are the deeply fragmented allegorical histories of a real predecessor civilization, a cultural DNA that preserves the memory of the world that was. Before we embark on this journey, we must recognize the profound stakes of our investigation. The search for a lost pre-human civilization is more than just a historical curiosity. The answer to this mystery has the power to redefine everything we believe about ourselves, our planet, and our place in the universe. For our entire existence, we have operated under the assumption that we are the first and only time that Earth has produced technological intelligence. It is the bedrock of our scientific, philosophical, and religious systems. To discover that we are not the first chapter, but merely the latest in a potential cycle of rise and fall, would force us to confront our own fragility and the true permanence of our achievements in a way we never have before. It would change the story of humanity forever. The theoretical framework is now complete. The impossible messenger from the stars has given us a clue. The Silurian hypothesis has given us a search method. And the great libraries of evidence, the geological record, the chemical strata, and the archives of human myth lie open before us, waiting to be read in a new light. We now leave the realm of speculation and enter the world of hard evidence, where the quiet, patient testimony of the Earth itself will guide our path. Our journey into deep time begins now, and our first witness is the stone beneath our feet, a witness that has kept its secrets for 250 million years. The case of the lost world is officially open. If you are a fellow explorer of forgotten histories, ready to question everything we have been told, then you are in the right place. This is not just a documentary. It is a shared investigation into the deepest possible history of our world. To support our journey into the unknown and ensure these stories are told, we ask that you join our expedition by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel for future explorations, and letting us know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Your engagement helps us build a community of curious minds dedicated to uncovering the truth, no matter where it leads. Now, let the evidence speak. Our investigation begins not in a laboratory or a library, but in the grand silent cathedral of Earth's deep history, the geological record itself, To find evidence of a civilization that existed 250 million years ago, we cannot search for the kinds of artifacts our own age would leave behind. Steel rusts, concrete crumbles, and glass shatters, returning to the sand from which it was born. The relentless engine of geology, of subduction, erosion, and sedimentation, grinds all such transient things to dust. We must therefore look for scars on a planetary scale, for evidence of activity so vast, so powerful, that it could alter the very grammar of the rock record. We are not looking for a needle in a haystack. We are looking for evidence that the entire haystack was rearranged, burned, and then replanted. Our first exhibit in this grand inquiry is a profound and unsettling silence in the Earth's autobiography, a mystery known to geologists as the Great Unconformity. It is a wound in the stone, a missing chapter that speaks more loudly than any text ever written. The Great Unconformity is, in the simplest terms, a physical boundary in the rock layers visible across the globe, from the depths of the Grand Canyon to the mountains of Scotland. Below this boundary lie ancient crystalline metamorphic rocks, granites and schists, forged in the violent heart of primordial mountain ranges. Above it lie much younger, neatly layered sedimentary rocks, like sandstone and shale, laid down by ancient seas. What is missing is the time between them. In many locations, this gap represents over 1 billion years of geological history, completely erased from the record. Imagine opening a history book to find that all the pages between the Roman Empire and the Renaissance have been violently torn out, leaving not even a fragment behind. This is the scale of the mystery. It is a planetary scale amnesia, a clean break in the timeline of our world that suggests a period of profound global-scale trauma from which the planet took hundreds of millions of years to recover and begin writing its story anew. Conventional geology offers a powerful, albeit debated explanation for this missing time, the snowball Earth hypothesis. This theory posits that roughly 700 million years ago, the entire planet was encased in a colossal sheet of ice, with glaciers miles thick grinding across the continents. Over millions of years, this immense glacial action would have acted like planetary-scale sandpaper, scouring away entire mountain ranges and billions of years of accumulated rock, pulverizing them and washing them into the sea. When the planet finally warmed and the ice receded, new oceans formed and began to deposit fresh layers of sediment upon the scraped clean bedrock, creating the sharp, clean line of the Great Unconformity we see today. It is an elegant and compelling theory that accounts for many of the observed facts, presenting the unconformity as the greatest act of natural erosion in our planet's history, the work of a world frozen to its very core. Yet, for all its explanatory power, the snowball Earth hypothesis does not resolve all the unsettling questions surrounding this great geological scar. One of the most persistent problems is the sheer flatness of the boundary in many locations. Glacial scouring is a violent, chaotic process that leaves behind deep gouges, U-shaped valleys, and a generally rugged, uneven terrain. However, in numerous outcrops around the world, the surface of the Great Unconformity is almost unnaturally planar, as if it was sliced clean by a blade. Furthermore, the chemical transition across the boundary is often remarkably sharp, lacking the expected graded profile of gradual erosion and redeposition. These inconsistencies have led some geologists to quietly question whether ice and time alone are sufficient to explain a feature of such anomalous scale and character. It is within these cracks in the orthodox explanation that our own investigation finds purchase, allowing us to ask a far more radical question. What if we are misinterpreting the nature of the tool that carved this feature? What if the force that erased 1 billion years of Earth's history was not the mindless grinding of ice, but the focused, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient application of technology? Viewed through the lens of the Silurian hypothesis, the Great Unconformity ceases to be a product of natural erosion and instead becomes a potential artifact of planetary-scale engineering. It could be the footprint of a global strip mining operation that lasted for millennia, a civilization quarrying the entire surface of the continents for rare metals, minerals, or energy sources on a scale we can barely conceive. It might be the result of a terraforming project, an attempt to level continents to alter sea levels or control climate. It is the ultimate technosignature, a geological feature so vast that it could only be produced by an intelligence that viewed planets not as homes, but as raw materials, a resource to be harvested and reshaped at will. To contemplate such an act requires us to imagine a motive as grand as the scar itself. A civilization capable of planetary engineering would likely face planetary-scale problems. Perhaps they were harvesting a specific element from the planet's crust, an element vital for their energy production or interstellar travel, and did so until the accessible sources were depleted. Alternatively, their industrial activity may have triggered a runaway greenhouse effect far more severe than our own, forcing them into a desperate globe-spanning geoengineering project to scrape away carbon-trapping rock or alter the planet's very surface to reflect more sunlight. In this scenario, the great unconformity is not a sign of their power, but of their desperation, the ultimate final act of a species trying to save itself by performing radical surgery on its own world. The clean, flat line is not the mark of a glacier, but the foundation of a world they tried and perhaps failed to build. If this were the case, the evidence would not only be in the missing rock, but in the thin boundary layer itself. A close microscopic analysis of the contact point between the ancient basement rock and the newer sedimentary layers could reveal traces that nature cannot easily explain. We might expect to find anomalous concentrations of processed metals, microscopic spherules of refined alloys, or isotopic ratios that betray the use of advanced industrial or even nuclear excavation techniques. These would be the faint microscopic tool marks left behind by the planet-sized quarrying machines, a chemical residue that could not be produced by the simple mechanical action of ice. The search for these specific techno-signatures at the boundary of the great unconformity represents one of the most exciting and tangible avenues of research for our hypothesis, a direct test of whether this great scar is a work of nature or a work of artifice. This interpretation forces us to recalibrate our entire understanding of a civilization's potential lifespan and impact. The sheer scale of the great unconformity suggests that if it was artificial, it was not the work of a few centuries or even a few millennia. It implies a civilization that was stable, powerful, and technologically active for geological spans of time, perhaps for millions of years. They would have been as much a part of the Earth's geological processes as volcanism or plate tectonics. Their industrial metabolism would have been woven into the very fabric of the planet's life support systems. The world they inhabited would have been an artifact in its own right, a fully engineered planet. This is a humbling and deeply unsettling thought, suggesting a level of integration between life, intelligence, and geology that our own fleeting civilization has not even begun to contemplate. The great unconformity, then, may be the tombstone of a people who did not simply live on the Earth, but who remade it in their own image. The vastness of this planetary scar stands as a silent, monumental piece of circumstantial evidence. It is a feature that the standard model of geology explains, yet not without lingering questions and inconsistencies. When viewed as a potential techno-signature, however, its strangest features, its global scale, its unnatural flatness, its sheer finality, begin to make a different kind of sense. It becomes the logical endpoint of a civilization that had mastered its planet's resources to an absolute degree. We are left with two competing narratives, one of a world frozen and scoured by ice, the other of a world harvested and leveled by intelligence. While conventional science rightly favors the former, our investigation must hold the latter as a distinct possibility. A ghost of a hypothesis that haunts the deepest canyons and oldest rocks of our world, waiting for a new piece of evidence to bring it into the light. This brings us from the macro to the micro, from the grand sweeping scar on the body of the Earth to the specific story of the life that inhabited it. If the great unconformity represents the stage upon which this ancient drama played out, then the fossil record is the script. Our investigation now turns to the second great anomaly, one that aligns perfectly with the time frame provided by our celestial messenger, 3I Atlas. We must travel forward in time from the formation of the unconformity's upper layers to the end of the Paleozoic era, 252 million years ago. Here, we find not a gap in the rock, but a horrifying gap in the record of life itself. This is the moment of the Permian-Triassic extinction event, an apocalypse so profound and so complete that it is known to paleontologists simply as the Great Dying. The Great Dying was the single most devastating catastrophe in the 3.5 billion-year history of complex life on Earth. It was a planetary reset button, an event that pushed the biosphere to the absolute brink of total collapse. The statistics are chilling and almost abstract in their totality. An estimated 96% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species were wiped from the face of the planet. Entire ecosystems, from sprawling coral reefs to dense fern forests, vanished in a geological instant. For a period of time, the planet was a barren wasteland, a world of dust and silence, dominated by fungi feasting on the endless rot of a dead world. It was the closest our world has ever come to returning to a purely microbial state. Life itself very nearly died, and the recovery would take more than 10 million years, an almost unprecedented period of biological stagnation. The mainstream scientific consensus points to a confluence of natural calamities as the cause, with the primary culprit being the Siberian traps. This was a volcanic event of unimaginable scale, a fissure in the Earth's crust that bled lava and toxic gases for nearly 1 million years, covering an area of eastern Siberia larger than modern-day Europe in a blanket of basalt thousands of feet thick. The resulting atmospheric injection of carbon dioxide and methane would have triggered a runaway greenhouse effect, causing global temperatures to soar. The oceans would have acidified and become anoxic, suffocating the marine life that formed the base of the global food chain. It was a perfect storm of natural destruction, a planet poisoning itself from within, and it serves as the accepted explanation for the near-total annihilation of life. But just as with the Great Unconformity, a closer examination of the evidence reveals a disturbing pattern that the standard model struggles to fully explain. The Permian-Triassic extinction was not a random, indiscriminate slaughter. It was strangely, unnervingly selective. While large, complex, and highly specialized animals were almost universally wiped out, certain simpler, more generalized, and seemingly unremarkable creatures survived with improbable success. The classic example is Lystrosaurus, a tusked, pig-sized herbivore that was a minor player in the pre-extinction ecosystem. In the immediate aftermath of the Great Dying, Lystrosaurus didn't just survive, it thrived, exploding in population to the point where it accounted for as many as 95% of all land vertebrates in some areas. The world after the apocalypse was, for a time, the planet of Lystrosaurus. This is not a normal pattern of ecological recovery. It is a pattern of domination, as if the world had been cleared specifically for them. This selectivity forces us to ask a profoundly uncomfortable question. Was this mass extinction entirely natural, or was it in some way guided? Was it the collateral damage of a war fought with biosphere-killing weapons? Was it the catastrophic, unforeseen consequence of a geoengineering project designed to combat the effects of the Siberian traps, a cure that proved far deadlier than the disease? Or in the most chilling interpretation, was it a deliberate act? Could a civilization, facing its own end and the collapse of the world it had built, have made a calculated decision to prune the tree of life, eliminating complex competitors and ensuring that the next cycle of evolution would proceed from a simpler, more manageable starting point? In this dark scenario, Lystrosaurus and other disaster taxa were not merely lucky survivors. They were chosen, perhaps even engineered, to inherit a sterilized Earth. Such a hypothesis sounds like pure fantasy, yet it provides a potential explanation for the extinction's most puzzling features. A technologically induced collapse, whether intentional or accidental, could account for the sheer speed and selectivity of the event. Advanced biological agents or radiation-based weaponry could theoretically target organisms based on their metabolic rate, genetic complexity, or specific place in the food chain, leaving simpler, hardier life forms untouched. The long 10 million-year recovery period, known as the coal gap for its lack of coal-forming forests, could be explained by the persistent, sterilizing effects of such an advanced, unnatural cataclysm. The planet wasn't just wounded, it was poisoned in a way that natural systems had never before encountered, requiring a far longer period to detoxify and reboot its evolutionary engine. The evidence for such a conclusion may lie not in the fossils of what survived, but in the chemical composition of the extinction boundary layer itself, the thin stratum of rock that marks the tomb of the Paleozoic world. Just as our own nuclear age is leaving a global fingerprint of radioactive isotopes like plutonium-244 in the sediment, a war or industrial accident of the Permian era would have left its own unique chemical calling card. Scientists have already noted anomalous spikes in certain elements like nickel at the Permian-Triassic boundary, typically attributed to the volcanic outgassing from the Siberian traps. But a more targeted search, guided by our hypothesis, would look for something else, for isotopes that can only be formed in high-energy fission or fusion events, for complex synthetic molecules that could not have been produced by natural biology, or for microscopic metallic structures that betray the hand of artifice. This leads us to a convergence of evidence. Our celestial messenger, 3I Atlas, carries the atmospheric ghost of this very era. The geological record shows a planet undergoing a biological reset of unprecedented and strangely selective severity at precisely this time. The hypothesis of a lost civilization provides a framework that connects these two anomalies. Perhaps the Siberian traps were not the ultimate cause, but merely a symptom, or perhaps even a trigger deliberately pulled. Imagine a civilization locked in a global conflict, a final desperate war where the ultimate weapons were geological, intentionally triggering supervolcanoes or fracturing tectonic plates. The Great Dying, in this context, becomes the echo of their fall, the final terrible scream of a world committing suicide, and 3I Atlas becomes a piece of the shrapnel from that ancient conflict, a silent witness finally returning home. Of all the geological and fossil evidence we've uncovered so far, from the immense silent scar of the Great Unconformity to the disturbingly selective nature of the Great Dying, which piece do you find the most compelling? Does the idea of a planetary-scale quarry resonate more? Or does the possibility of a guided artificial mass extinction seem more plausible? Each points to a different aspect of this hypothetical civilization, their industry versus their potential desperation or warfare. Let us know your thoughts in the comments as we continue to build our case, moving from the rock and bone to the finer, more subtle chemical clues they left behind. The testimony of the Earth's stone and fossils presents us with a haunting possibility. It shows us a planet with a history of profound and anomalous trauma. The Great Unconformity suggests a period of planetary-scale surface alteration far beyond the capabilities of natural erosion as we currently understand it. The Great Dying presents a biological apocalypse whose selectivity and severity defy easy explanation by natural causes alone. Both events are vast, circumstantial clues. They do not constitute proof, but they establish a pattern of planetary-scale weirdness, a background radiation of mystery that permeates the deepest layers of our world's history. They create a space within the scientific narrative where a lost civilization is not just a fanciful idea, but a plausible, if extraordinary, explanation for a set of very real and very challenging data points. We have now examined the largest and oldest pieces of the puzzle. We have seen the colossal scar left upon the body of the planet and the ghost of a massacre in its fossilized blood. These lines of evidence, geology and paleontology, operate on scales of millions of years and continental landmasses. They are the brutal, blunt force trauma of our planet's cold case. But a sophisticated civilization would leave behind more than just scars. It would leave fingerprints. These are the finer, more resilient clues, the chemical residues, the isotopic anomalies, and the molecular artifacts that could survive for eons, locked away in the most stable and undisturbed archives on the planet. Our investigation must now move from the quarry to the laboratory, from the grand and visible to the subtle and microscopic. The Earth has shown us the crime scene. Now we must search for the weapon. Our journey takes us next into the realm of forensic geochemistry. We will drill deep into the ice of Antarctica, which holds a frozen record of the ancient atmosphere, and dredge the silts of the deep ocean floor, where sediment settles in a slow, undisturbed rain that preserves a high-fidelity chemical history of the world above. It is here in these quiet, forgotten archives that we will hunt for the specific technosignatures predicted by the Silurian hypothesis. We are searching for the chemical ghosts of their industry, their power sources, and perhaps their downfall. The stone has told a story of immense physical power. The chemistry may yet tell a story of a more subtle but equally profound technological mastery. The case is far from closed. In fact, the most compelling evidence may still be waiting to be uncovered. Our investigation now descends from the colossal scale of planetary geology into the silent, microscopic world of forensic chemistry. The great scars on the Earth, like the Great Unconformity and the Permian-Triassic extinction, provide a stage, a setting for a potential global drama. But to prove that this drama was directed by intelligent hands, we need more than circumstantial evidence. We require a fingerprint, a calling card left behind at the scene of the crime. Such a signature would not be written in stone, but in atoms. It would be a chemical residue so alien to the natural cycles of the planet that it could only be interpreted as a product of technology. To find it, we must journey to the most pristine archives on the planet, the abyssal plains of the deep ocean and the ancient frozen heart of the Antarctic ice sheet. These are the quiet libraries of Earth's history, where the dust of millennia has settled in undisturbed layers, each one a page preserving the chemical story of its time. Our first target is the deep-sea sediment core, a cylinder of hardened mud, drilled from miles beneath the ocean's surface. For geochemists, these cores are time machines. As we travel deeper into the core, we travel further back in time, through layers of volcanic ash, cosmic dust, and the microscopic skeletons of marine organisms. Our focus is the thin, dark boundary layer that marks the tomb of the Paleozoic era, the precise stratum corresponding to the Great Dying, 252 million years ago. For decades, this layer has been analyzed for clues to the extinction's cause, yielding evidence of volcanism and anoxia. But armed with the Silurian hypothesis, we are looking for something else, something the original investigators were not trained to recognize. We are searching not for a natural poison, but for the chemical fallout of a civilization, and it is here, in this sliver of ancient ocean floor, that we find our first definitive technosignature. Within this thin boundary clay, globally distributed and starkly out of place, we find an anomalous concentration of a very specific element, xenon-129. Xenon is a noble gas, largely unreactive, but its isotopes tell a story of cosmic violence and nuclear fire. Xenon-129 is special. It is primarily formed from the radioactive decay of iodine-129, an isotope that has a relatively short half-life of 15.7 million years. Crucially, iodine-129 is not produced in significant quantities by the normal life cycle of stars or typical geological processes on Earth. Its primary source is the high-energy neutron bombardment of heavier elements, a process that occurs in two known environments, supernovae and nuclear fission reactions. A spike in its daughter product, xenon-129, is therefore a ghost, an echo of a powerful radioactive event that transpired in the deep past. It is the indelible signature of a nuclear process. The conventional explanation for such an isotopic anomaly in the geological record would be a nearby supernova explosion, which would have showered the solar system with exotic elements just before the Permian extinction. This is a plausible, naturalistic explanation. However, it fails to account for the full picture. A supernova powerful enough to deposit this much iodine-129 would have also deposited a host of other heavy radioactive isotopes, most notably plutonium-244. Yet analysis of the boundary layer shows that while xenon-129 is anomalously high, plutonium-244 and other supernova markers are conspicuously absent or at levels inconsistent with such an event. The isotopic fingerprint is incomplete. It does not match the profile of a dying star. It is a signal without the expected cosmic noise, suggesting a source that was far more localized and specific in its radioactive output. A source not from the heavens, but from the Earth itself. This is where the Silurian hypothesis provides a chillingly elegant solution. An industrial civilization that had mastered nuclear power would, over millennia, produce vast quantities of iodine-129 as a byproduct of its fission reactors. A global catastrophic event, such as a series of meltdowns during a societal collapse, or more terrifyingly, a planet-spanning nuclear war, would release this accumulated iodine-129 into the atmosphere on a massive scale. This radioactive cloud would then circulate the globe and settle out, creating the precise globally distributed plutonium pore signature we find in the Permian-Triassic boundary layer. The xenon-129 spike is not the echo of a distant dying star. It is the radioactive ghost of their fallen civilization. It is the chemical signature of their apocalypse, a self-inflicted wound that poisoned the biosphere and helped trigger the Great Dying. It is the ultimate evidence of a power great enough to rewrite the book of life, but not wise enough to control it. The most disturbing aspect of this discovery is its direct parallel to our own time. The Anthropocene, the geological epoch of humanity, is being defined by a similar nuclear signature. Since the mid-20th century, our own nuclear weapons testing and power generation have been creating and releasing these same artificial isotopes into the environment. A future geologist drilling a sediment core 250 million years from now would find our civilization marked by the very same spike in the decay products of fission. We are actively writing the same chemical epitaph into the rock record. The presence of xenon-129 at the Permian-Triassic boundary is therefore not just a clue about a lost world, it is a mirror reflecting our own. It suggests that the path of technological advancement may lead with a grim predictability to the mastery of the atom and the ever-present risk of a self-engineered Armageddon. The ghost in the rock is a warning from our own potential future. As we continue to analyze this boundary layer, we find that the nuclear ghost did not travel alone. Mixed within the same stratum that holds the anomalous xenon, our instruments detect another, more tangible clue, a fine dust of microscopic metallic spherules. These are not the rough, irregularly shaped particles of volcanic ash or the common chondrules found in meteorites. They are almost perfectly spherical, tiny beads of metal and glass, typically ranging from 10 to 100 microns in diameter. Under an electron microscope, their composition is revealed to be even stranger than their shape. They are composed of exotic alloys, fusions of metals like tungsten, osmium, and iridium, with traces of rare earth elements like neodymium and yttrium. These are not materials that nature readily combines. They require extremely high temperatures and controlled conditions to form, conditions that point directly to advanced industrial processes. Once again, we must first consider the conventional explanation, a massive asteroid or comet impact. Such an event could certainly generate enough heat to melt rock and metal, which would then cool into spherical droplets as they rained back down through the atmosphere. The Chicxulub impact that killed the dinosaurs, for example, left behind a similar, though chemically distinct, layer of spherules. However, just as with the xenon anomaly, the impact hypothesis for the Permian-Triassic boundary has significant weaknesses. The chemical makeup of these spherules does not match the composition of known asteroid types. They appear to be made of processed, refined materials, not the raw, homogeneous stuff of a space rock. Furthermore, their distribution is a fine, even blanket across the entire globe, which is more characteristic of atmospheric fallout from a persistent source than the chaotic, plume-like ejecta from a single impact point. The alternative interpretation, viewed through our lens, is that these spherules are the industrial dust of the lost civilization. They are the microscopic byproducts of their manufacturing, their energy production, and their transportation systems. Imagine a world with millennia of continent-spanning industries utilizing processes like plasma smelting, laser ablation, or even matter energy conversion. Consider the exhaust from fusion rockets or the atmospheric re-entry burn-up of countless artificial satellites and orbital structures over millions of years. These activities would constantly shed a fine mist of vaporized refined metals into the upper atmosphere, which would then condense and fall as a persistent, global rain of microscopic spheres. The layer we find at the Permian-Triassic boundary may not mark a single catastrophic event, but rather the sudden final shutdown of this global industrial engine, causing the accumulated atmospheric dust to finally settle out all at once. This interpretation paints a picture of a civilization whose industrial metabolism was truly planetary in scale. Their presence was so profound that their waste products formed a constant component of the global weather system, a permanent artificial haze in the skies of the ancient world. The sheer quantity of material required to form a globally detectable layer of these spherules is staggering, implying an industrial output that would dwarf our own by orders of magnitude, sustained over a geological timescale. They were not just living on the planet, they were integrated into its biogeochemical cycles in the most fundamental way. The air they breathed, the water they drank, and the ground they walked on would have been saturated with the byproducts of their own technology. The metallic dust in the rock is the fossilized air of their world, a testament to a society that had fully terraformed its planet into a factory. This brings us to the most provocative and perhaps the most important chemical clue of all. Buried alongside the nuclear ghost and the industrial dust, our analysis reveals a third anomaly, one so far outside the bounds of known natural processes that it forces us to confront the true technological sophistication of this predecessor civilization. We find microscopic, non-biological and structurally complex microfilaments. These are not fossilized bacteria or mineral fibers like asbestos. They are impossibly thin, hair-like strands, often exhibiting signs of being woven or braided together, some forming hollow nanotubes. Their composition is even more shocking. They are primarily made of materials like silicon carbide and boron nitride, with traces of conductive elements embedded within their structure. These are advanced ceramics, materials we ourselves have only recently developed for high-performance applications in aerospace and computing. There is no known natural process that can create these structures. Biology works primarily with carbon compounds, and while some organisms like diatoms create intricate silica shells, they do not weave braided fibers of silicon carbide. Geology can form crystals and simple fibers, but not complex interwoven structures with hollow cores. These filaments are, by any reasonable definition, artifacts. They are the remnants of a material science far beyond simple metallurgy. They strongly suggest the use of molecular engineering or nanotechnology. They are the fossilized remains of their advanced materials, perhaps the building blocks of their computers, the reinforcing fibers in their construction materials, or even the remnants of self-replicating nanomachines. Their presence in the rock is the equivalent of finding a microchip in a dinosaur bone. The implications of this discovery are profound. The ability to manufacture materials at the molecular level represents a technological leap that our own civilization is only just beginning to contemplate. It implies a mastery over matter that would enable the construction of materials with incredible strength, lightness, and functionality. It is the key to building everything from space elevators to self-repairing structures to hyper-efficient energy systems. If this civilization possessed nanotechnology 250 million years ago, their capabilities would seem like magic to us. They would not have built with crude blocks of steel and concrete. They would have grown their cities, woven their vehicles, and perhaps even integrated their technology directly with their own biology. The world they inhabited would be almost unrecognizable to us, a seamless fusion of the artificial and the natural. The very survival of these filaments for 250 million years is a testament to their artificial nature. They persisted because they were designed to persist. Materials like silicon carbide and boron nitride are exceptionally durable, resistant to heat, pressure, and chemical corrosion. A civilization building for eternity, for geological time, would choose such materials. These filaments are, in a sense, the ultimate time capsules. They have outlasted the mountains they may have been part of and the oceans they settled in. They are the most direct and unambiguous legacy of their creator's intelligence, a message written in the language of molecular engineering that says simply and undeniably, we were here and we were powerful. They are the final, irrefutable fingerprint on the geological murder weapon. Now we must connect these disparate chemical clues back to the celestial messenger that began our entire investigation. The object designated 3I Atlas. For months, as it approached, astronomers studied the light from its coma, decoding its basic atmospheric composition. But as the object passed its closest point to the sun, solar heating caused it to shed more than just gas. It began to release a fine trail of microscopic dust. Using the advanced instruments of the James Webb Space Telescope, scientists were able to capture and analyze this dust with unprecedented precision. What they found was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle, the clue that locked the entire case together. The dust trail of 3I Atlas contained the very same technosignatures we had just discovered in the 250-million-year-old rock. The spectrographs revealed the presence of microscopic, perfectly spherical particles with the same exotic alloy composition: tungsten, osmium, iridium, as the spherules from the Permian-Triassic boundary layer. The analysis was so precise, it could even identify them as refined, processed materials, not natural meteorite dust. And then came the final confirmation. Embedded within the icy matrix of the comet's nucleus and being shed in its dust trail were the unmistakable forms of braided, non-biological microfilaments, identical in structure and composition to those found in the deep-sea sediment cores. The link was no longer circumstantial, it was direct and physical. The impossible visitor from the stars was made of the very same industrial waste that defined the tomb of a lost terrestrial world. This discovery transforms our understanding of 3I Atlas completely. It is not a comet, it is not a messenger, it is a piece of the crime scene, launched into space and preserved in a deep freeze for 250 million years. It is a chunk of their world, perhaps an asteroid they were mining, a piece of a space station or a fragment of the planet itself, ejected into a vast, stable solar orbit by the very cataclysm that destroyed them. Its strange ancient Earth atmospheric signature is not a paradox. It is the trapped atmosphere from their time, perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space. The object's outgassing was not the sublimation of primordial ices, but the slow, steady release of the last breath of a dying world. The convergence of evidence is now overwhelming. The chemical fingerprints found in the deepest, oldest layers of our planet match, with perfect fidelity, the material composition of the celestial anomaly that first drew our attention. The timeline aligns perfectly. The object's Paleozoic atmospheric signature points to the exact same geological moment as the chemical technosignatures found in the rock record. The xenon-129 spike, the metallic spherules and the nanotech filaments tell a coherent story of a global, nuclear-capable and molecularly advanced industrial civilization that experienced a catastrophic collapse right at the Permian-Triassic boundary. 3I Atlas is the Rosetta Stone that allows us to read these disparate clues as a single, terrifying narrative. It is the final witness, returned from the silence of deep time, to testify to the existence of the world that came before us. We have followed the evidence from the macroscopic to the microscopic, from the great scars on the planet's face, down to the individual atoms that betray a history of industrial fire and nuclear death. The case built from stone and chemistry is formidable. It presents a consistent, if shocking, picture of a civilization that rose to unimaginable heights of power and then vanished in a cataclysm of its own making. The Earth itself, in its rocks and sediments, has acted as our primary witness, its testimony preserved for eons. But this leaves one final, profound question unanswered. If a world-spanning civilization of such power existed and fell, could all knowledge of it truly disappear without a trace? Or could the memory of such a monumental existence survive, not in stone or atoms, but in the most resilient and mutable medium of all, the stories we tell ourselves? Our investigation must now leave the laboratory and enter the library of myth, searching for the faint, cultural echoes of this great forgotten trauma. Our investigation has until now been one of cold, hard science. We have read the testimony written in stone, deciphered the chemical signatures left in ancient dust, and connected them to a celestial messenger carrying the ghost of a world 250 million years old. The evidence paints a compelling, if circumstantial, picture of a technologically advanced civilization that met a catastrophic end. But a trauma of this magnitude, an event that reset the entire biosphere of the planet, would not only leave scars on the Earth, it would leave an echo in consciousness itself. If any intelligent life survived, even in a devolved, shattered state, the memory of the world that was, of its power, its glory, and its terrible fall, would become the most enduring artifact of all. Our search now moves from the physical to the metaphysical, from the geological record to the fragile yet resilient archive of cultural memory. We are looking for the ghost in our own collective machine. To begin this search, we must first reconsider the very nature of myth. For centuries, we have dismissed the most ancient stories of humanity as primitive fables, moral allegories, or crude attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they are something more? What if these universal narratives are not inventions but memories? Memories passed down through a chain of oral tradition so long and so fragmented that the literal truth has been eroded, leaving only the archetypal skeleton of the story behind. In this view, mythology becomes a form of cultural DNA, a data storage system designed to transmit the most vital information, warnings, histories, and cosmic knowledge across the abyss of deep time. We propose that the most persistent and universal myths shared by cultures across the globe are not fables about gods and monsters, but are the deeply distorted, allegorical histories of the civilization that came before us. The most powerful and ubiquitous of these is the myth of a golden age. From Hesiod's Greece to the Hindu concept of the Satya Yuga, from the Egyptian tales of Zep Tepi to the Sumerian accounts of a pre-Diluvian paradise, cultures with no historical contact all tell the same fundamental story. There was a time in the distant past when humanity, or its divine ancestors, lived in a state of grace. This was a world without toil, sickness, or war, a paradise of effortless abundance. The gods of this era were not ethereal spirits, but tangible beings who walked the earth, possessed unimaginable power, and taught the arts of civilization. Viewed through the lens of our hypothesis, this is not a fantasy of a perfect past, but a fragmented memory of a technologically mature world. The magic of the gods was their science, their effortless abundance the product of automated industry and energy mastery, their immortality a reflection of advanced medicine, or perhaps a much longer natural lifespan. The Golden Age was the peak of the predecessor civilization, remembered by its traumatized inheritors as a lost, unattainable perfection. Following the Golden Age, in nearly every mythological tradition, comes a cataclysmic fall, most often embodied by the story of a great flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah, the Hindu tale of Manu, the legends of countless indigenous cultures, all describe a world cleansed by water, a divine punishment that wiped the slate clean, save for a few chosen survivors. Mainstream archaeology interprets these as localized flood memories, elevated to mythic status. But their global universality suggests a shared memory of a far greater planet-scale event. The collapse of the predecessor civilization, whether through nuclear war or a geoengineering disaster, would have created effects indistinguishable from a divine flood to any primitive survivors. Imagine skies choked with soot and debris, triggering torrential toxic rains for decades. Imagine the catastrophic melting of polar ice caps from a sudden violent temperature spike, leading to a rapid global rise in sea level that would have inundated coastal regions. The Great Flood was not a story about water. It was the memory of the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the end of their world, told from the perspective of those who watched it happen from the shore. The final piece of this mythological triptych is the explanation for why the Golden Age was lost. An act of hubris. The Tower of Babel story, where humanity builds a tower to challenge the heavens and is struck down and scattered, is the archetypal example. The Greek myths are filled with mortals like Icarus or Prometheus, who steal the fire of the gods, their technology, and are punished for it. Plato's story of Atlantis tells of a noble, advanced society that grew corrupt, arrogant, and greedy for power, and was consequently swallowed by the sea. This is the moral, the warning encoded within the memory. It is the story of a civilization that grew too powerful for its own wisdom. Its technological reach exceeded its moral grasp. This narrative aligns perfectly with the chemical evidence we have uncovered. The Xenon-129 spike is the ultimate signature of technological hubris, the misuse of nuclear power on a planetary scale. The myths are telling us, in the only language that could survive the eons, that the world before us did not fall to a natural disaster. It committed suicide. If this predecessor civilization left behind a warning in the form of myth, it is logical to assume they might have left behind a more practical legacy as well. A civilization capable of orbital mechanics and molecular engineering would surely understand the vast cyclical nature of the cosmos. They would know that their end was not the end of life on Earth, but merely the end of a chapter. It is plausible that they would attempt to leave a user manual for the next intelligent species to emerge, a way to help their inheritors rediscover the fundamental laws of the universe more quickly. This legacy would not be a complex text, which could not survive but a set of fundamental data points encoded into the very foundations of culture, in stone, in mathematics, and in the observation of the stars. We are referring to the phenomenon of impossible astronomical knowledge found in the world's earliest civilizations. The most profound example of this is the knowledge of the precession of the equinoxes. This is the slow, 25,800-year wobble of the Earth's axis, a cycle so vast and subtle that its modern discovery required centuries of precise, documented astronomical observation. Yet, evidence of this knowledge is found encoded in the architecture and mythology of numerous ancient cultures, from the layout of the Giza pyramids to the complex calendrical systems of the Maya and the cosmological cycles of Vedic India. These early cultures, which lacked telescopes and advanced mathematics, should not have been able to detect, let alone measure, a cycle that takes nearly 26 millennia to complete. The mainstream explanation that they accomplished this through thousands of years of continuous naked-eye observation, passed down perfectly through generations, strains credulity to its breaking point. It is a profound anomaly in the history of science. The Silurian hypothesis offers a more direct, if more startling, explanation. This knowledge was not discovered by these nascent human civilizations. It was inherited. The Great Year of the Precession is the most important long-term clock available to any civilization on Earth. It governs the slow shift of the constellations and correlates with long-term climate cycles. It is the fundamental rhythm of the planet against the backdrop of the stars. This knowledge is the most crucial basic data point you would leave behind for a fledgling civilization. It is the master password to understanding the cosmos. The survivors of the previous cycle, scattered and devolved, would have passed this single vital piece of information down as a sacred truth, a commandment from the gods. They instructed their descendants to build monuments aligned to the stars and to track the slow turning of the sky, ensuring this cosmic clock would not be forgotten. This concept of inherited knowledge could also explain other astronomical enigmas, such as the infamous case of the Dogon people of Mali. In the 1930s, French anthropologists reported that Dogon priests possessed astonishingly detailed knowledge about the Sirius star system. They allegedly knew that Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, had a companion, Sirius B, a tiny, incredibly dense white dwarf star, completely invisible to the naked eye. They were said to know its 50-year orbital period and that it was made of a heaviest metal in the universe. This knowledge, which modern astronomy only confirmed with powerful telescopes in the 19th and 20th centuries, has been the subject of intense debate. Skeptics argue it was the result of cultural contamination from modern visitors, while proponents see it as proof of ancient contact. Within our framework, it is neither. It is another legacy file, a fragment of a much larger astronomical database, preserved with religious devotion by a specific group, its original context and meaning lost to time. From the echoes in memory and the legacy in starlight, we turn to the final line of cultural inquiry, the echoes in stone and metal. These are the so-called out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts. These are the dozens of objects that have been discovered in archaeological or geological contexts that suggest they are technologically far more advanced than the culture that should have produced them. Mainstream science, with good reason, is highly skeptical of such claims, often dismissing these artifacts as misidentified natural formations, modern hoaxes, or simple objects whose function has been misunderstood. An investigation like ours, however, which posits the very existence of a lost advanced past, must consider them as a valid, if problematic, line of evidence. They are the potential physical glitches in the orthodox historical timeline. Consider the infamous Baghdad battery, a set of terracotta jars containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod found near Baghdad and dated to the Parthian period around 200 BCE. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar, these devices can produce a small electric current. While archaeologists often suggest they were used for electroplating or in religious rituals, the very concept of galvanic cells seems utterly out of place in the ancient world, predating Alessandro Volta's invention by nearly 2 millennia. Similarly, the Saqqara bird, a small wooden model from an Egyptian tomb dated to 200 BCE, bears a striking resemblance to a modern glider, with aerodynamic wing profiles and a vertical stabilizer, features that suggest a sophisticated understanding of flight principles. These objects are not proof of a lost civilization, but they represent a persistent pattern of anomalous technological knowledge that seems to appear, flicker, and then vanish from the historical record. Within our framework, these UPARTs are not the direct technology of the predecessor civilization. Their technology, based on the evidence of the microfilaments, would have been far more advanced. Instead, these artifacts are better understood as cargo cult science. They are the products of the inheritor culture's early humanity, attempting to replicate the magic of their ancestors based on fragmented, poorly understood instructions. Imagine survivors of our own civilization's collapse, trying to teach their descendants how to build a radio, without access to factories or electronics. After a few generations, the knowledge would degrade. They might end up creating a wooden box with a quartz crystal inside, an object that vaguely mimics the form and principle, but lacks the true function. The Baghdad battery and Saqqara bird may be just that, faint, degraded echoes of a far superior science, the last sputtering embers of a fire of knowledge that was extinguished 250 million years ago. When we synthesize these three lines of cultural evidence, the universal myths of a golden age and a hubristic fall, the impossible astronomical knowledge of deep time cycles, and the persistent anomalies of out-of-place artifacts, a coherent picture begins to emerge. It is a picture of our own species' deep collective amnesia. We are a civilization haunted by the ghost of a memory of a world of immense power that was brought to ruin. This memory was preserved in the most durable forms available, in archetypal stories that became religion, in cosmic data encoded in sacred architecture, and in failed attempts to replicate a technology that was no longer understood. The cultural record does not provide the same kind of hard, falsifiable proof as geochemistry, but it provides something equally important: a narrative. It gives a voice and a motive to the silent physical evidence. The echoes in our myths and the anomalies in our history are, therefore, not the primary evidence in our case. They are crucial corroborating testimony. They demonstrate that the cataclysm we identified in the geological and chemical records was so profound that its psychological impact has resonated through the eons, shaping the very foundations of human consciousness and culture. The story of a lost paradise and a tragic fall is not a story we invented. It is the story that invented us. It is the oldest story on Earth because it is the story of the end of the Earth's first story. As we prepare to connect all these threads, from the comet in the sky to the myths in our minds, we must accept that we are not the first to walk this path of technological ambition, and the warnings of our own potential for self-destruction have been with us since the very dawn of our species. Our investigation has until now been one of cold, hard science. We have read the testimony written in stone, deciphered the chemical signatures left in ancient dust, and connected them to a celestial messenger carrying the ghost of a world 250 million years old. The evidence paints a compelling, if circumstantial, picture of a technologically advanced civilization that met a catastrophic end. But a trauma of this magnitude, an event that reset the entire biosphere of the planet, would not only leave scars on the Earth, it would leave an echo in consciousness itself. If any intelligent life survived, even in a devolved, shattered state, the memory of the world that was, of its power, its glory, and its terrible fall, would become the most enduring artifact of all. Our search now moves from the physical to the metaphysical, from the geological record to the fragile yet resilient archive of cultural memory. We are looking for the ghost in our own collective machine, the story that survived the death of its world. To begin this search, we must first reconsider the very nature of myth. For centuries, we have dismissed the most ancient stories of humanity as primitive fables, moral allegories, or crude attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they are something more? What if these universal narratives are not inventions but memories? Memories passed down through a chain of oral traditions so long and so fragmented that the literal truth has been eroded, leaving only the archetypal skeleton of the story behind. The most powerful and ubiquitous of these is the myth of a golden age. From Hesiod's Greece to the Hindu concept of the Satya Yuga, cultures with no historical contact all tell the same fundamental story. There was a time in the distant past when humanity, or its divine ancestors, lived in a state of grace. This was a world without toil or sickness, a paradise of effortless abundance. Viewed through the lens of our hypothesis, this is not a fantasy of a perfect past, but a fragmented memory of a technologically mature world. The magic of the gods was their science, their effortless abundance the product of automated industry and energy mastery. The Golden Age was the peak of the predecessor civilization, remembered by its traumatized inheritors as a lost, unattainable perfection. Following the Golden Age, in nearly every mythological tradition comes a cataclysmic fall, most often embodied by the story of a great flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah, the legends of countless indigenous cultures, all describe a world cleansed by water, a divine punishment that wiped the slate clean, save for a few chosen survivors. Mainstream archaeology interprets these as localized flood memories, but their global universality suggests a shared memory of a far greater, planet-scale event. The collapse of the predecessor civilization, as indicated by our chemical evidence, would have created effects indistinguishable from a divine flood to any primitive survivors. Imagine skies choked with the soot and debris from a nuclear winter, triggering torrential toxic rains for decades. Imagine the catastrophic melting of polar ice caps from a sudden, violent temperature spike, leading to a rapid global rise in sea level. The Great Flood was not a story about water. It was the memory of the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the end of their world, told from the perspective of those who watched it happen from the shore. It is the allegorical history of the planet's greatest murder. The final piece of this mythological triptych is the explanation for why the Golden Age was lost, an act of hubris. The Tower of Babel story, where humanity builds a tower to challenge the heavens and is struck down and scattered, is the archetypal example. Plato's story of Atlantis tells of a noble, advanced society that grew corrupt, arrogant, and greedy for power, and was consequently swallowed by the sea. This is the moral, the warning encoded within the memory. It is the story of a civilization that grew too powerful for its own wisdom. Its technological reach exceeded its moral grasp. This narrative aligns perfectly with the chemical evidence we have uncovered. The Xenon-129 spike is the ultimate signature of technological hubris, the misuse of nuclear power on a planetary scale. The myths are telling us, in the only language that could survive the eons, that the world before us did not fall to a natural disaster. It committed suicide. They are a warning passed down from the ghosts of a civilization that flew too close to the sun and set their entire world on fire. Yet, for all their narrative power, myths are not physical proof, they are echoes, not evidence. But what if a final clue existed that could bridge the chasm between the allegorical and the actual? What if there was one last place on Earth, a continent so remote, so hostile, and so completely sealed from history that it could preserve a secret of this magnitude? Our investigation now leads us to this final frontier, Antarctica. A landmass larger than the United States and Mexico combined, buried under an ice sheet nearly 3 miles thick in places. For millions of years, this continent has been in a deep freeze, a vault locked by nature, preserving whatever lies beneath its surface. For decades, scientific teams have been mapping the subglacial bedrock with ice-penetrating radar, seeking to understand the continent's hidden geology. But in recent surveys of the remote, inaccessible highlands of Wilkesland, the radar returned an image so shocking, so impossible, that it has been held in classified silence until now. Deep beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, in a region where the ice is over 2 miles thick, our instruments have detected a structure. This is not a mountain range or a random geological feature. The radar returns show a massive, anomalous complex of perfect right angles, sweeping geometric curves, and a gridded layout utterly inconsistent with any natural formation. Its scale is staggering, covering an area of nearly 100 square miles, larger than any city our own civilization has ever built. The sheer mass of this object creates a measurable gravitational anomaly, a detail that first drew our attention to the region. This is a clear, unambiguous, and colossal artifact, a metropolis frozen in time. It is a city-sized tombstone buried under millions of years of accumulated ice, a silent testament to a presence that predates all human history by a timescale that is difficult to comprehend. The final shocking clue in our investigation is not a myth or a chemical trace. It is a buried city at the bottom of the world. The implications of this discovery are world-shattering. The age of the ice sheet above this structure is estimated to be at least 14 million years old, meaning the artifact itself must be older still, placing it far outside the bounds of any known human activity. It suggests that before the last great polar shift and the onset of the current ice age, Antarctica was a temperate continent, capable of supporting a vast and complex civilization. Suddenly, the most esoteric of ancient myths, the legends of a lost polar homeland, a primordial paradise at the top or bottom of the world, known to the Greeks as Hyperborea or Thule, are cast in a terrifying new light. They cease to be fantasies and become distorted geographical memories. This structure is the physical, tangible proof that a Golden Age civilization not only existed, but that we have found its potential ground zero. It is the ultimate lost continent, not sunk beneath the waves, but entombed within the ice. This subglacial metropolis is the linchpin of our entire case. It is the final devastating piece of evidence that connects every thread of our investigation. The myths of a lost paradise now have a physical location. The evidence of a global, technologically advanced civilization now has a capital city. The question of where they went is answered. They are there, buried and silent, their world flash-frozen by a planetary cataclysm. This Antarctic structure is the Rosetta Stone that translates the whispers of myth into the hard language of reality. It proves that the echoes in our collective memory are not dreams, but the faint, persistent trauma of a real, forgotten history. The case of the lost world is no longer a matter of speculation. It is now a matter of exploration. The tomb has been found, and the time has come to uncover the truth it holds. Do you believe these ancient myths are just stories, or are they the echoes of a real, forgotten history? Share your perspective below. The time for gathering clues has passed. We have followed the trail of this ancient mystery, from the cold vacuum of space to the deepest layers of the Earth, from the grand scars on the planet's face to the microscopic dust of its forgotten industries, and finally, into the persistent echoes within our own collective soul. Each piece of evidence, when viewed in isolation, presented a profound but perhaps explainable anomaly. A strange comet, a missing billion years of rock, a selective mass extinction, a chemical spike, a universal myth. But we are no longer looking at isolated clues. The final stage of our investigation is to assemble these fragments, to lay them out on the table and see how they lock together, forming a single, coherent and world-altering image. The journey of our protagonist, the mystery itself, now reaches its climax. The individual notes of dissonance are about to resolve into a single haunting chord, a sound that has been waiting 250 million years to be heard. The key that unlocks this entire puzzle, the Rosetta Stone that allows us to translate the silent language of the past, was the celestial messenger that began our journey, 3I Atlas. It was never just a comet. It was the anomaly that shattered our assumptions, the impossible fact that forced us to ask a forbidden question. Its atmospheric signature, a perfect match for Earth's Paleozoic era, was the thread that connected the sky to the ground. It gave us a specific time frame, the end of the Permian period, 252 million years ago, and a specific chemical fingerprint to search for. Without this celestial guidepost, the clues buried in our own world would have remained disconnected curiosities. 3I Atlas was the catalyst, the trigger, a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean that upon its return told us not only that we should look, but precisely where and for what. It was the first paragraph of a story we never knew was written. And when we followed its direction, we found the rest of the page. The direct physical link between the sky and the ground was confirmed in the most undeniable way possible. The microscopic dust trail shed by 3I Atlas, as it was heated by our sun, contained the very same techno-signatures we unearthed from the 250 million-year-old sediment cores. The perfectly spherical beads of exotic metal alloys and the braided, non-biological microfilaments of advanced ceramics were not merely similar. They were identical in composition and structure. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct material match across an almost unimaginable gulf of time. It proves beyond any reasonable doubt that the object from the stars and the fallout layer from the deep past share a common artificial origin. The object is a piece of their world, and the layer is the tomb of that same world. The connection is absolute. This chemical layer, now tied to a specific origin, tells the story of the civilization itself. The anomalous spike in Xenon 129 is the indelible ghost of nuclear fission on a planetary scale, the signature of a society that had unlocked the power of the atom. The metallic spherules are the fossilized smog of a global industrial engine that ran for millennia. Its metabolism so vast, it altered the chemistry of the atmosphere itself. And the silicon carbide microfilaments are the irrefutable evidence of a mastery over matter we are only just beginning to dream of: nanotechnology. This was not a civilization of bronze and iron. They were a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, commanding the total energy resources of their planet, building with materials engineered at the molecular level. They were, for all intents and purposes, geological and atomic gods. The timing of this fallout layer provides the motive and the consequence. It lies precisely at the boundary of the Permian-Triassic extinction, the Great Dying. The strangely selective nature of that apocalypse is no longer a mystery. It was not a random act of nature, but the direct result of the poisons this civilization unleashed in its final throes. The nuclear fallout, the toxic industrial waste, the potential use of biosphere-killing nanoweapons, these would create the exact pattern of death we see in the fossil record, wiping out complex, specialized life while leaving simpler, hardier organisms to inherit a sterilized world. The Siberian traps may have been the stage, but the final fatal blow was self-inflicted. The Great Dying was not a natural extinction, it was the shadow of their global suicide, the final, terrible scream of a world murdering itself. With the nature of their rise and fall established, we can now look back at the oldest and largest scar of all, the Great Unconformity, and see it in its proper context. Our civilization capable of such a dramatic end must have had an equally dramatic beginning and a long, powerful reign. The billion-year gap in the rock record is no longer just an erosional anomaly. It becomes the footprint of their golden age. It is the evidence of their planetary scale engineering, the foundation of their world, a terraforming project or resource extraction operation so vast and so ancient that the planet itself was remade in their image. The Great Unconformity represents the sheer duration and power of their existence, a testament to a civilization that was not a fleeting presence, but a geological force in its own right, lasting for millions of years. It is the stage upon which their entire epic, from creation to apocalypse, played out. And the memory of this epic survived. The universal myths of a golden age, a subsequent act of hubris, and a world-destroying flood are no longer childish fables. They are the fragmented, allegorical history of these very events, passed down through the shattered lineage of survivors. The Golden Age is the folk memory of the time of planetary engineering and technological paradise. The story of hubris, the Tower of Babel, the fall of Atlantis, is the moralized memory of their arrogant mastery of the atom, a power they could not control. And the Great Flood is the mythologized, traumatic memory of the Great Dying itself, a world scoured not by divine water, but by the toxic rain and rising seas of their self-inflicted apocalypse. Our deepest and most foundational stories are not about us. They are the inherited nightmares of the world that came before us. Even the impossible knowledge of the ancients now falls into place. The precise astronomical data, like the 26,000-year precessional cycle, was not a discovery made by early humans staring at the sky. It was a legacy, a deliberate inheritance. A civilization of such foresight, facing its own certain doom, would have surely tried to leave a warning and a user manual for whatever intelligence followed. They encoded the most fundamental cosmic clock into myth and monument, ensuring their successors would have a key to understanding the deep cycles of time. It was their final desperate act of preservation, a message not in a bottle, but in the very foundation of culture, a way of saying, "We failed, but you do not have to. Understand the great clockwork, for it governs all." And now we arrive at the final, anchoring piece of physical evidence, the colossal geometric structure buried beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice. This is ground zero. This is the physical location that makes the myths tangible. The legends of a lost polar paradise like Hyperborea cease to be dreams and become distorted geographical memories. This subglacial metropolis is the capital of the Golden Age, the heart of their global empire, flash frozen by the very cataclysm that ended their reign. It is the body at the crime scene, the irrefutable proof that this was not a hypothetical civilization, but a real, physical presence with cities, structures, and a home. The Antarctic anomaly is the linchpin that locks all other evidence, celestial, geological, chemical, and cultural, into a single, undeniable framework. We have found their tomb. Let us now step back and tell the story not as a series of clues, but as a history. A civilization arose in the deep past so powerful that it reshaped the surface of its own planet, leaving a scar 1 billion years deep. For millions of years, they reigned in a technological golden age, mastering molecular engineering and the power of the atom. But this power bred a fatal hubris. Whether through war or industrial accident, they unleashed the very forces they commanded, poisoning their world with nuclear fire and industrial waste, triggering the greatest mass extinction in the planet's history. In their final moments, knowing they were doomed, they launched a fragment of their dying world into space as a final, desperate testament, an artifact we now know as 3I Atlas. They fell, and their world was entombed in ice, but their story survived as a ghost in our myths, a warning for the civilization that would one day rise from their ashes, us. With this complete picture, we can finally see 3I Atlas for what it truly is. It is not a messenger. It is not a probe. It is a tombstone. It is a piece of wreckage from that ancient apocalypse, a fragment of their world, perhaps a mining station, an orbital habitat, or a chunk of the planet itself, blasted into a vast, stable solar orbit by the cataclysm. For 250 million years, it has silently circled the sun, a ghost ship sailing the dark ocean of the solar system, preserving within its icy heart the last breath of their atmosphere and the dust of their fallen cities. Its return to our skies was not an alien visitation, but a homecoming. It was the final witness, compelled by the laws of gravity to return to the scene of the crime and deliver its silent, irrefutable testimony across the abyss of time. The case of the lost world is now closed. The protagonist of our story, the mystery itself, has completed its long journey from a single point of anomalous light in a telescope to a fully realized, tragic history of a world that came before our own. The evidence is overwhelming, the threads woven together into an undeniable tapestry. From the atoms in the rock, to the scars on the continents, to the myths in our minds, and the artifact in our sky, every piece tells the same story. The great silence of deep time has been broken, and its message is clear, profound, and deeply humbling. The story of intelligent life on this planet did not begin with us. We are only the second act. The weight of this revelation now settles upon us, forcing us to look at our own world, our own technology, and our own future through new and far more ancient eyes. The great synthesis is complete. The verdict of deep time is in. The protagonist of our story, the mystery itself, has finally revealed its true face, and in doing so, has held a mirror up to our own. The discovery of a predecessor civilization is not merely a new chapter in the history of Earth. It is a fundamental rewriting of our own identity. For our entire existence, we have labored under the grand and comforting delusion of being the first, the chosen, the sole inheritors of this blue marble. We saw ourselves as the authors of the planet's intelligent story, the pinnacle of a 4.5 billion-year evolutionary journey. That story is now finished. We now know that we are not the first draft, but the second. We are the children of a world that has already known gods and monsters, a world built upon the foundations of a forgotten, far greater epic. The silence of the past has been broken, and its first and only word is a profound and humbling correction to our place in the universe. This revelation forces us to confront the staggering arrogance of our own sense of permanence. We build our monuments of steel and glass, we weave our empires of digital code, and we believe in our deepest hearts that they will last. We speak of leaving a legacy for the ages. But what are our proudest achievements next to a civilization that engineered the very crust of the planet, that mastered the atom and built with materials designed to last for geological time? They vanished. Their world, immeasurably more advanced and powerful than our own, was erased so completely that it survived only as a chemical ghost, a whisper in myth, and a tomb of a city buried under miles of ice. If their molecularly engineered world could be brought to ruin, what does that say of our concrete cities and fragile data networks? It tells us that our civilization is a fleeting breath on a cold mirror, that our Anthropocene layer is merely the newest, thinnest signature being written over their ancient, mile-deep epitaph. The implications of this discovery ripple outwards, beyond our planet and into the silent cosmos. For decades, we have stared into the night sky and asked the great lonely question of the Fermi paradox: where is everybody? The universe appears ancient, vast, and teeming with the potential for life. Yet we hear nothing but a great silence. The story of our predecessor offers a chilling and plausible answer. Perhaps the silence is not the sound of an empty universe, but the sound of a cosmic graveyard. Perhaps technological intelligence is not rare at all, but its lifespan is tragically, predictably short. Civilizations may be like sparks in the dark, rising to planetary mastery and unlocking the secrets of the atom, only to use that power to extinguish themselves long before they can ever reach their neighbors. The great filter may not be the leap from simple life to complex, or from complex to intelligent, but the final, terrible test of surviving one's own technological adolescence. We are not alone because life is rare. We are alone because we are standing on a tomb that is one of countless others scattered among the stars. This is no longer a philosophical abstraction. It is a direct and measurable parallel. The chemical evidence of their fall is the most terrifying mirror of all. The anomalous spike in Xenon 129, the ghost of their nuclear fire, is the very same signature our own civilization began writing into the geological record in 1945. The metallic spherules and synthetic filaments, the dust of their global industry, are the ancient analogues of the microplastics and industrial pollutants we are now pumping into our own skies and oceans. We are not just living on their planet, we are walking their exact path step for step. This suggests a grim determinism that the road of technological advancement may lead, with a kind of fatal inertia, to the same precipice. The power to remake a world and the power to destroy it are one and the same, and the wisdom to differentiate between the two may be the rarest element in the universe. The Earth itself is transformed by this knowledge. It is no longer simply our home. It is a palimpsest. It is an ancient manuscript from which one story has been scraped away, imperfectly, so that another could be written over it. We live on the overwritten page. The faint traces of the original text are everywhere, if we only know how to look for them, in the unnatural flatness of the great unconformity, in the strange selectivity of the fossil record, in the radioactive ghost atoms buried in the seabed. Our minds dig for metals that they may have processed first. The carbon in our bodies may have once been part of the air they breathed in their final toxic days. We are haunted, not by spirits, but by a history so profound that it has become part of the planet's very geology and biology. We are not the inheritors of a pristine virgin world, but the squatters in a ruin of unimaginable antiquity. This discovery shatters the myth of linear progress, the comforting idea that history is a straight line moving ever upward from primitive to advanced. That line is now bent into a circle, or perhaps a spiral. We are not on a journey to a future they never reached. We are potentially on a collision course with their past. It forces us to ask the most fundamental questions about our own trajectory. Are we truly creating something new? Or are we merely recapitulating an ancient and tragic cycle of rise and fall? Is there an escape from this pattern? A way to achieve a stable, planetary-scale intelligence that does not consume itself? Or is collapse an inherent feature of any civilization that reaches a certain threshold of power on a finite world? The story of our predecessors is the ultimate cautionary tale, a warning that the greatest threat to a civilization is not an external enemy, but the unchecked nature of its own success. As the Object 3I Atlas now recedes from our solar system, its brief revelatory visit complete, it leaves us with this profound and unsettling knowledge. It has fulfilled its final quarter-billion-year-old purpose. It was not a visitor but a mirror, forged in the fire of an apocalypse 250 million years old, sent on a long journey through time to show us our own reflection. It showed us the ghost of a past that could have been our own, and in doing so, it has shown us a vision of a future we may be hurtling towards. It returned to the scene of the crime to deliver its silent testimony, and now, its duty done, it departs into the cold and the dark, leaving us alone with the verdict. The responsibility for what we do with this knowledge, with this warning, is now entirely our own. The mirror is gone, but the reflection remains burned into our collective consciousness. The story of our world is far older, stranger, and more tragic than we ever imagined. As this messenger from a forgotten Earth finally leaves our skies, we are left to ask ourselves the ultimate question it delivered. Is its story a warning, a memory, or is it a prophecy? And what signature will our own civilization leave behind for the next cycle to discover in the deep silence of time? Our journey through deep time ends here for today, but the quest for answers is eternal. If you believe this forgotten story needs to be told, help us by sharing this documentary, liking and subscribing for the next chapter in our exploration. Thank you for traveling with us.